My dear sisters and brothers in Jesus Christ, there are many stories that are told, like I spoke about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer on the 25th yesterday, about a time of depression and how that song was created by Johnny Marks because he didn't have money. And here there's another story of the great economic depression in 1940s. There was this gentleman who lost his job, like many at the lockdown now. And so they had to sell their house and move into a basement of somebody else's house. And that too was expensive. And so the whole family lived in that basement with a very small kitchenette, but they lived there. And this little girl who lived there, one day her teacher came to see her. She said, "I'm coming home to see your family." Quite an intelligent girl. And so the teacher landed up in the home of this little girl and was shocked to see the father, the mother, 3 brothers, 2 sisters, or 1 sister and her. Quite shocked to see that they were all so cramped in this place. And as they sat there, she noticed that there was kind of mold on the wall, and yet the house was very neat and clean. And she realized that they made her, said, "If you like, would you like to stay for the prayers that we say before we have our dinner?" So she noticed that this child had prayed and so on. Next day, when the child was in school, the teacher took her one side and said, "I'm so sorry that you live in such a place, that you don't have a home to live in." I'll repeat, that you don't have a home to live in. And this little girl replied, "Oh no, we have a wonderful home, but we are still looking for a house to put that home in." I think that was brilliant of that little girl to say something so beautiful. A home is not how big a place you have. The home is, my distant brothers, is what you make out of it. As I was preparing this sermon, I clicked to get a picture, because if you see my homilies, I always have little pictures put into my homily to remind me. And I saw so many discussions that were on the net about what is a home, what is a house, how does one make a house into a home. My dear sisters and brothers in Jesus Christ, this little girl knew at that age what is a home. My dear sisters and brothers, a home is not a place, a house is not a place, unless it becomes full of love. In this lockdown, one of the nice things that is happening is that many houses in our parish are becoming homes. So many mothers don't have to shout out and say, "Is this a restaurant? You come in when you want, go when you want, eat what you want." But with the lockdown, everybody has to stay at home, until recently. And so many houses that were houses and big houses are becoming homes in this lockdown, where people have to sit and adjust with themselves. As we celebrate this feast of the Holy Family, the question is, why a feast? Don't we have the feast of Christ the King, Sacred Heart of Jesus, Corpus Christi? Every Sunday we are celebrating a solemnity of Christ. Every Sunday is a solemnity. That's why it's a day of obligation. And then we have every month, that's how the church has planned it, every month we have a feast of Our Lady. 1st January, Our Lady of Mother of God. February, we'll have Our Lady of Lourdes. 3rd, we'll have Annunciation. And and then you have these various things. That May, the month of Mary. October, Fatima and Our Lady again. So every month is Our Lady. And then we have great feasts of Saint Joseph. So why would the church have a feast of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph today? And the reason, my dear sisters and brothers, is that the church wants to tell us that if a home is prayerful and sounded and people live together, that makes what makes for happiness. As I began the Mass to tell you, it becomes my refuge. One of the Psalms that I like very much, where it says, God, you say to God, "You are my hiding place, you are my rock, you are my shelter." Okay? my refuge, and a home has to be something like that. My dear sisters and brothers, 40 days from yesterday, 40 days, Our Lady and Joseph will go for the purification, the readings that we did today. That's why it's called Candlemas. It's a big thing abroad because the whole of Europe is still in darkness and everybody goes with candle lights. It's a big mass as big as Christmas. But it's also a mass, why it's so important is that is what Simeon says, a light to the Gentiles. All of us, my dear brothers, are Gentiles. And so we have this Candlemas. Now when you have this prayer service, which the readings of today are, it follows the law in the book of Leviticus, where the firstborn child, as you heard the gospel, is offered back to God. So often we have baptisms and parents put their children on the foot of the altar and they don't know why they are doing it. Because my mother-in-law said, put. And her mother-in-law said, put. But there's a tradition that goes back to the book of Leviticus, that the child is a gift of God. And that child, you promise to give back, just like Hannah promised to give Samuel back, just like St. Anne's promised to give Our Lady back, and so on. We consecrate the child to God and let God decide what the child has to be. And so, my dear sisters and brothers, when Mary goes there, two things are happening in that feast. One, Jesus will be accepted in the Jewish community because he'll be named and he'll be circumcised as per the law of Abraham. And Mary will be purified and become clean once again. Not that she had to be clean. She was born without original sin, but she moved with the tradition of that place. So she would come 40 days later and have the purification ceremony to make her clean. That's something for us to think about, because many wives don't come to church for 40 days. You're not Jew, you're Catholic. And you don't require those 40 days to stay at home and say, I don't have to go to church. No. Those 40 days were Jewish custom. When Jesus came in, he abolished all those customs. You can still come to pray and worship God. And so when the child is brought for baptism, there's something nice that the priest says, and I like when people listen. When I do a baptism, I'm so amazed that non-Catholics are right in front listening to what we are saying. Other Catholics taking photographs, etc. Good. But there's a time and a purpose. And in that whole prayer of the baptism, there are a few things that the priest tells the parents. First of all, that child is a gift of God. And that, my dear sisters and brothers, must never, ever be forgotten. When I was in a particular parish, I'm not going to name it because it's not a nice story, there was a child that was born premature, but the parents were not bothered at all. It was so sad. I remember running to that huge hospital in the vicinity, and I was shocked to see that child in the natal ICU. It's a room, they have this kind of like lecterns, and every child is kept there, premature babies. And the whole room has oxygen. And I entered and I saw this child's body, like certain things were still open up. They were doing up the heart, and this child was there. And then a month or two later, they had the baptism of the child. And again, unfortunately, I had to do the baptism. So there was a baptism, and the parents were like, still, fun, this, that. And do you know that they had a fantastic party, the afternoon lunch party, and the baby in bed, the father rolled over the baby, and the baby died. I couldn't accept this fact that I baptized the child at 11:30, 12, and by 4 o'clock we got news that the baby died. Aren't you so grateful that you had a child? Aren't you so grateful that God protected that child? And after a month you have a baptism. And then you go on to booze and drink so much that you don't know your child is sleeping next to you, a child that requires special care, and you roll over that baby and, I don't know, I don't have words, but parents you know what it feels to get up and see the child dead because of your negligence. So the first thing the priest will tell you, that the child is a gift of God. Don't tell me that I know what to do and I know when to have a child, etc. No. The child is always a gift of God. And that is why I am one of those pro-life people. I'm totally against abortions. And if there's a child, I'm totally for adoption. But you can't turn a child down because that's the gift of God. Secondly, a child completes the covenantal love of a couple. I have so many friends, ex-students, who have already decided when we get married, we are not going to have children. And there's a group of them, 5 of them. And if anybody has a child, you're no more part of the gang. And I keep on telling them, and one of them told me, Father, mind your own business. Okay? And they go bungee jumping, parachuting, all that kind of thing. When are we going to do it? But you don't know that when you don't have that child, it's not going to bind your love together. How long you're going to do this? Couples we know who are married 25, 30 years need something to bind them. And the thing that binds them is that gift of God, that child. And that's why the priest will say, this particular child is binding your covenantal love that you made on your wedding day. Thirdly, he will remind the parents that they are the first and the best teachers. And so whatever you do, your child's watching you. I like the story that a little boy was at home and his father hardly had much time for him. But one day the father came early and played around with him and so on, and the mother was very happy. And the mother reminded the father, whatever it is, he has to go to bed at this time. And so the father said, but when I come back from work, he's sleeping, so give us like 5-10 minutes more. And the little boy was so excited. Ultimately, the father convinced the son to go to bed. And when he went up to his room to put him in bed, he told his dad, listen, Dad, you don't know what the routine is. First, I have to change into my pajamas. Second, I have to kneel on my bedside and pray. And so the father said, okay, I'll sit on the edge of the bed. And the boy changed into his pajamas and knelt down. And this is the prayer that he said. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. But should I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. That was his usual prayer. But tonight he looked up at his dad, then raised his eyes up to heaven and said, Dear God, make me a good man and a big man like my daddy. And the story goes on to say, as soon as the boy went to sleep, the father knelt at the bed and said, Dear Lord, please make me a good man like my boy thinks I am. My dear sisters and brothers, children grow up according to what they see. There's never been any parish, there's never been any kind of time when I don't get parents who come and say, my son never listens to me, my daughter never listens to me, they're going to college, they're throwing around their weight, and so on. And I look at them like, so what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? I've explained this before in my hymn. One person came to me from another parish and said, Father, you speak about psychology, so I want your help. And I said, yeah. He said, my son the other day took the plate of food and smashed it on my face. I think I've told you this before. But these are stories or events that stick in your mind. I asked, in which class is he? Father is in the 11th, he's in St. Andrews. I said, oh. So what was the problem? He said he came to have his meal and I served him. So I said, you always serve him? He said, yeah. So okay, that's where the first problem begins. Then she said, I went into the kitchen because the milk was about to overflow or overboil, whatever. And she said, he shouted from the room, from the front room, get me a glass of water. I said, he said that, or did he say, Mom, get me a glass of... No, Father, he never, he demands, he commands. get me a glass of water. And I just said, come in and get it yourself. And Father, I took the milk to keep it one side, and I turned, and bang, that plate of food came onto my face. I asked her, you're going to answer me yes or no? Is he your only son? Yes. Is your husband abroad? Yes. Does your husband come once a year and pamper him? Yes. And that boy said, don't you ever dare talk to me like this. I said, does your husband say that to you? Yes. And so I said, if all this has been happening from the time he's young, what do you want me to do? Can I change that? No. You have brought him up this way to demand what he wants. And then she got up and I said, you know one thing, I'll pray for him, because if he doesn't change his ways, his marriage is going to land up like your marriage. She must have gone home and told that boy, because every Wednesday, if he did come for novenas, he would look at me and put his head down, because he knew that the game is up. My dear sisters and brothers, many of our children in Orlam are spoiled by the grandparents, given into anything that they want. There is no discipline, there is no obedience, as you heard in the first reading and the second reading. And we turn out to have children where they don't agree with the parents. There's a difference between they being more educated than you, but you have the wisdom. And if you don't train your child, please see the wrong that you're doing. I have a child who's gone to the mother, widow mother, and she came to tell me yesterday, 23rd, 24th, Father, my child used my credit card and swiped 1,40,000 out of the bank. As usual, I just looked at her. What can I do? Saying, Father, I have to go and borrow money because I have nothing for Christmas. And then I said again, you've always given in to him for everything, aren't you? She said, yes, Father. I know I spoiled him. But does that rectify anything? Does it solve anything? Haven't you heard this before? Then why do you pamper your child? There's a sense of discipline that you heard in the first reading. I can go on and on. But it affects me tremendously when you come with your problem and I'm so helpless because I have no answers when your child reaches this stage. In the early days, we got two on our bottom and we learned that these are certain things you can't do and certain things you cannot say. You tell a child today, say hello to auntie. Why? Say good evening to grandpa. Why? When are you going to learn? That's the importance of this feast. I just want to end with one last story which I like very much. There was George, who was a sailor, and he was a bachelor. And his uncle said, Uncle George, I want you to come and stay with us when you retire, because I didn't have a dad and you were the one that brought me up. And so George stayed with them, and Bill, the nephew's name was Bill. Bill was so happy that Uncle George was there. And the children suddenly realized that they have a grandfather, kind of a granduncle, and so on. And every night, this George, who was a sailor before, would tell them stories of various countries. And he sometimes even make it up. As the text says, he had enlightened their imagination to go to various countries. And then one day he said, in a particular country, I once found a map. And that map, I never got to see where it was, but it had a treasure. George died. And then Bill went to clear up his things. And when he went up to clear his things, he found a map. He was so excited that he found the map. With trembling fingers, he opened the ribbon, opened it and spread it out, and realized that the map was of the locality that they were staying. And a nice little chest box of the treasure was pointing to his house. And the line said, I found my treasure staying with you. I hope your children and family could say the same thing.